Hi there everybody. This video will serve as an introduction to value drawing. So the essential questions that you'll need to know from this introduction are: what is a value drawing? What is value? What does that word mean? What is a contour line? What is an implied line? And what are value shapes? So what is a value drawing? A value drawing is simply a drawing composed mainly of value. But what the heck is value? Is that the worth of an object? Absolutely not. It's an art term that simply means different shades of light and dark. Now that ranges from black to white, and then an infinite number of different grays in between. This is an example of a value drawing. A value drawing, using simply lights and darks and value shapes, is as close to nature as you can get. Value drawing is the secret to realism in your work. And if you look over here, once you've mastered value drawing, the same techniques can be applied to colored pencil or any form of colored medium, including painting. So by understanding what a value drawing is and all the fundamental techniques used to create it, you can achieve work like this. In order to attempt this technique, you first need to understand the two different types of lines in art. Those two are contour lines and implied lines. Contour is the outside surface of something. An implied line simply means to state without directly saying something. Contour lines are simply lines in the most traditional sense. A line does not exist in nature, therefore it's simply an abstract symbol. And since our brain uses edges to understand what we're looking at, that line is a symbol representing an edge. Here's an example of contour lines. Notice how the edge of the arm is simply a line on both sides, in the shape of an arm and in the shape of fingers. Notice how the shape of the hair is simply lines drawn in the shape of hair on the outside. That's so that the brain can understand the form of hair. Likewise, this drawing of a robot, this is entirely composed of contour lines. This robotic foot is simply lines arranged in the shape of a robotic boot or a foot. That helps our brain know what we're looking at. Traditional cartooning is composed primarily of contour lines, and a contour line does not have to stay the same thickness. Contour lines can get thin and thick and have all sorts of organic tendencies to it. For example, this cheek becomes fat and then it gets thin right along the outside. It's still a line, it's still an edge, it's a barrier showing us where the jaw is, where the hair is, where the eyes are, and so on. This is the most natural way to draw. The next type of line, and one you may not be familiar with, is called implied line. An implied line is where you define an edge for the brain using light and dark values. You create this edge by putting a light value shape next to a dark value shape. Let's go back to this drawing. The portions of the drawing on the left are composed entirely of value. We have dark values, middle values, light values, white values. Let's look at the wrist. We know that this wrist is separate, that there is an edge right here between the knuckle and the thumb joint, because there is an edge created. We have a dark value here, a light value that's very tiny, and then a dark value next to it. So what's a value shape? A value shape is simply a plane on your paper composed entirely of value. To understand how to do a value drawing, it's important to perceive your subject, the thing that you're drawing, as if it were simply a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different value shapes of dark and light values. Once again, a value shape is any plane that's defined on all sides, similar to geometry. And what you do is you look at your subject and you try to extract all the planes that you can. So for example, the lightest plane on this whole piece of torn sponge would be this one. The next darkest would be this plane on the outside. And then followed by the most obvious, the dark shadow from the torn part here. But if you want a very successful drawing, you want to look deeper than just these large, obvious planes. Try to see as many different value shapes as you can within it. For example, this area. And then the darker area in the middle, including the cast shadow. And then the darkest after that. Now by simply working like this, you can achieve value in your piece. Yeah, but it goes more than simply coloring in shapes that match the values of your subject. You also need to apply texture, you need to blend your values together, and sometimes have a hard edge on your values to separate the two planes. Let's look at another example. This one more complex. And so if we look at, try to find the lightest gray that we can in this little area, I see, these shapes over here. And then the next darkest would be this mass right next to it, followed by, it gets progressively darker as it gets closer and closer to the interior. And then, most obvious, the dark shadows over here. Put them all together, and that's what you got. Try to achieve as many different values as you can, ranging from black all the way through white. Now, this doesn't come naturally. This takes practice, especially if you haven't done it before. And one thing that I encourage you to do, anytime you're just sitting around and an object catches your eye, try to look at it and see if you can extract as many value shapes as you can from it. And it's simply by doing this over and over, doing little studies like this of the value shapes, that it becomes intuitive, that you can actually build a tissue from your imagination and draw from that visual library of all the other tissues you've studied and create a unique and original one. Okay, so I hope you all found this helpful. This has been simply an introduction to value drawing. We'll get into more specifics as to how to do it, how to know where your values go based on lighting fundamentals, and so on. I look forward to seeing you guys in class. Answer the questions at the end of the video for credit. Take care.